It truly gives us a great pleasure having Nirav Shah with us today. Nirav has more than 17 years of experience in different industries such as telecom, healthcare, education, and e-commerce. In fact, Nirav has worked in companies such as Walmart as a workforce leader at US and iMark Health as a director, WFM, and Pearson as a global head of director, and few of other well-known organizations. Currently, Nirav has taken up a new assignment in Alto Pharmacy at US. Nirav carries a lot of experience in capacity planning. In fact, he is the right person to talk about the topic. We're going to talk more about Nirav during the presentation. With this, I welcome all the WFM professionals. Hope you're keeping safe and healthy. Stay safe and stay healthy. Looking forward to having this session, exciting one. With this, I invite Nirav onto the first masterclass of 2022. Truly great. I mean, it gives a great pleasure with, from GWFM, Nirav, to have you with us as a first person, and you're the right person to talk about the trend. In fact, market is witnessing. In fact, and when I started talking to a lot of WFM folks in last 1 month, they've been going through a lot of challenge. One is, they're getting sick because of third wave, and organizations has no idea that whether to have the employees working from home or maybe hybrid model or vice versa. And a lot of WFM folks are finding in challenge in creating kind of accurate capacity planning and also the forecasting.
Yep.
I'm sure that which we could like going to discuss on this today. With this, I hand over the control to you.
Yes.
Thank
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Shiva. It's my pleasure, um, to be on this platform, and I'm gonna share my screen just to make sure that we are good technically. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this session. I'm very humble uh, to share the stage with you and lots of our workforce professionals. Number of you guys have joined, and I want to take this as a discussion. I want to make it more interactive as possible. So please have lots of questions, and let's discuss this pandemic. First of all, workforce planning, as we all know, it just, and I always like to open with that. It's not just mathematical equation. It's just not a science. It's arts and science, like we all know. Um, that we have to use the data, use the science, but at the same time use a lot of guts and experience, right? That's what workforce planning is all about. So let me go ahead and see what we have in store for you guys today. What's the agenda here? So real quick, we'll just start with like a brief walk through like a workforce model. I know like the audience here, a lot of folks are like, I know I see the names and it gives me smile. Like I see Amit is there. There are a lot of folks that I work with. They really don't need my advice, right? And still I feel humble that they are joining here. Um, so I'll keep this more as something that we share. It's an idea sharing, that me kind of speaking and giving you guys my 2 cents on it. So yeah, we'll walk through like, and I know few folks are new here, and they may need, like, I know operation folks should be there, and they may need kind of like a slight brush up on, hey, what workforce life cycle looks like. Before even we create capacity planning models, what are the things we should consider? Um, what is the framework? Like we build the plan, we maintain it, things happen, we have to change it, we rebuild it, we maintain it, right? That's the cycle for capacity planning. And then the main topic that we all here for, right? How do we do capacity planning in this pandemic situation? It is tough um, to really get accuracy. Um, and let's talk about those things. And then I'll keep some room for Q&A here. And Dr. Shiva, you can help me through, stop me in between if there are any questions coming up, that we can address it right away and make it more interactive for everyone. So I hope that agenda, interests you all. Again, like I said, we'll do a quick walkthrough. And most of you guys know how to create models and are like, doing this for a long time. And you may not need like, really deep dive into what are the technicalities of it. But this is what my philosophy. I was just talking to Dr. Shiva before we jumped on to this session, that it's like, if you really want to win a race, like a car race, like there is a NASCAR race, and you don't know the course, which is like this pandemic. We don't know, what the roads will look like, what are the road conditions and stuff like that. We just have to be prepared to drive and drive the best results. But before even you get into the race, you need a good working car and a good experienced driver, right? And that's why we are going through some of the prerequisites, like what are the things we should really do and keep in mind while we are doing this workforce capacity planning model. So I'm gonna uh, dive into that. That's why, that's a brief walk that I want to present. And we have seen this next slide, that you know a lot of different versions, and I love most of them. And it tells the same thing. What is the life cycle of workforce management? Where does it start? Where does it end? What are the hands ups and stuff like that? The reason I put this here is because there are like few key topics that it hits, and those are like really necessary when we do workforce planning, right? So and I love, someone gave me that WFM little carton, like, hey, we are like the workforce minions, you know. Sometimes it feels like it. It's a little nice comic thing for me. I always remember, like, a lot of time we have just so much going on, and we are just like focused on one thing, like laser focused, and there's just a lot around going on, and it feels like we are like working like minions there. But really quickly, the workforce management life cycle, right? Let's just kind of walk through that. Pretty straightforward. You start with your volume analysis forecast. Um, it is like the root of the tree. If the roots are not getting enough food, enough water, enough care, the tree is not gonna grow nice on you, right? Very basic, very obvious in our world. Um, I see there is a hand raise there. Okay. So let's look at the next like phase. So once so basically workforce is three things, right? How much work, how long does it take, and how many folks do we need to do that work, right? First two things tells us how many people we need, right? And then there is a lot of other equations, stuff like that. But we always like to get it right. How much work and how long does it take, which is your volume forecast and your AHT forecast. And then your productivity, which is basically your capacity. That, hey, if I put two people to work, how much work they can produce, and stuff like that, right? And then it comes your, so basically first you do your demand planning, demand forecast, and then your supply side, your forecasting model, and then your staffing model. One of the biggest thing, and that's why I have this slide here, is this item: capacity model approval by operations. Does not matter, guys, how accurate your forecast looks, how accurate models look, but if you don't have your operations behind that, your client behind that, your vendor behind that, it's not gonna really be successful. So because they would know the practicality of it. Sometimes like we sit behind our computer screen and design a model that looks really good, but we may or may not know the real challenges. And that's why the approval is very important in this life cycle. And then how do you shift from that bigger picture into a short-term model, which is your short-term requirements and scheduling and stuff like that. We do the model sometime on a monthly basis. So we may have like a flat FTE requirements that we can calculate. Hey, I need 500 FTEs next month, but within the month, like, there are weeks that are on a low end and there are weeks that are on a high end. How do you ride through those ups and downs, right? That is what you transition from your long-term model to the short-term model, which is your weekly, pre-plan upcoming weeks by interval, and then it gets down all the way to the interval level. Again, this is a lot of push-pull and a lot of coordination, right? You work with your operations, your training, your hiring, your IT, your site leaders, your BPO partners, your clients, to really just go back and forth and, hey, what are we going to manage? How are we going to manage? What do we have in store for? Do we have room for more shrinkage? Are we looking to gain more hours? Are we driving overtime? Are we, trying to drive occupancy? What are we trying to do, right? And then it gets into our frontline folks, our frontline warriors, I always call them, is the real-time people who really like are the people who get victims of if our planning is not right, then their day is not going to be good, right? They're just gonna suffer. Either we are too much forecast, over forecast, or under forecast and stuff like that, right? So that becomes the real time end day of execution, right? And then the cycle comes back. Then you need to have enough input mechanism, a very process oriented, where you get the feedback from your real time people, your schedulers back into your forecasting model. What we are expecting, what we are forecasting, and what is actually happening, and close that gap and do your cycle again, right? Few key important things that sound simple, sound easy, but very effective. Number one, right? The best in workforce management cadence. Source of truth designed and documented for all data sources. This is huge, guys. I tell you why. Because I could say, and Amit, I'm going to make you a guinea pig. I could say, hey, Amit, I need 40 people. I'll just say 40 people. And Amit could get 40 headcount. Three of them may be part-time, or 40 FTEs. And their FTEs in certain region may be working 45 hours a week. We don't know. So there is a gap, right? What I'm expecting and what he may be delivering would be two different things. How do you close this gap? How do you make sure that everyone is on the same page, which is here? You need to have definitions. You need to have understanding of when you talk, you need to talk the same lingo, same language. So even if it just don't leave it to assumptions, guys. Like you need, when you say something, don't always think that the other person agrees or understands. And same thing, client vendor relationship, operations, executive relationship, ask those questions, ask those clarifications. That is really important, which is clear roles and responsibilities. Forecaster might be thinking, hey, capacity planner will take care of that. Capacity planner might be thinking, hey, my reporting person would be doing that. So having a clear roles and responsibilities really help. Like, sit down, draft those things. And in my tenure, I've seen that it's not that you said it and it's done. Even just recent, like in Walmart, Ian and I and the leadership team may have gone like 4 times even within a year and say, well, let's shift this to team A to team B. It makes sense in today's situation. So keep looking at that. It's not like once you set and you're done. Okay. And those handoffs has to be very clean and defined. Obviously, standardized processes that we always emphasize on, and always look and try to find out. That's what we do. That's in our blood. That's in our gene pool. Analyze it. Why something is broken? What can we do to fix it? What are like 1, 2, or 3 different reasons that it's breaking on you? So that's kind of like the workforce life cycle. You guys all are experts in this one, but I thought it would be a good starting for us, a good reminder that when we get deep into problem solving, sometimes we may forget the basics or overlook the basics, not forget. And it's a good reminder to make sure that time to time we need to visit back. Like I look at these slides or this life cycle, try to look at like once or two a quarter, like, hey, you know what? Like, yeah, it's a good reminder. Like, I should have it like posted somewhere. It keeps reminding me that we need to sometime, zoom out and take a different perspective and look at it. Okay, let's transition to the next slide. So and this is, I just try to put it like, our models, like, we are workforce models. So before we start our modeling, right, what is important? When we are either building a new model or taking over a new business or a new client, or take like for me, right, I just like changed my jobs and got into Alto, Walmart, huge, customer base, Fortune 1 company, lots of entities, lots of customers, lots of contacts. On the other side, Alto is a startup company. We don't have all the data. We don't know all the data. Very small customer base, very small agent base, like, 300-400 seats. Um, and one would think, hey, you know what? I have managed larger workforce and this seems baby, it's small. But we all know uh, it's more complex. When you need to manage workforce that's smaller, it has its own challenges, right? It's, the size really does not talk for the complexity. If someone says, hey, if you manage something large in workforce, this is small. Trust me, it's not. My experience, like, and you guys all would agree, managing, 3, 4, 5,000 agents sometime, because larger workforce, you can really have a very defined process that, hey, my agent profile A will only take customer service calls, and it's easy. While you get into smaller environment, and then there is a lot of multi-skilling. In the morning I might be doing intake, in the afternoon I might be doing billing, in the evening I might be doing outbounding, and that creates complexity in scheduling and forecasting and modeling. So in this slide, in this discussion, what I want to um, focus on is, what do we need to have? How do we whiteboard before building a model or rebuilding a model? Again, I will hit this again and again: KPI goals, definitions, and calculations. Please make sure that we all have a same definition on how I calculate utilization, how I calculate productivity, how I calculate occupancy or AHT, because there may be slight variations depending on the business and the line of the business that you're handling. What are the inputs that you should keep in mind building a capacity planning model, right? Your workload assumptions, which is again question one, right? How much work? It could be your call volume forecast, your chats, your tickets, your emails, your tasks, so many different things, right? Handle time forecast. Do you have a clear handle time, like your system is managing? Or there are systems in my tenure that I have seen where you may not have a clean understanding of handle time, like email or back office channels and stuff like that. And you might need to work with operations or L&D to do time and motion study and say, hey, how long this task take, what the AHT should look like. If I put someone to work and do these things, if they're finishing 10 in an hour, that becomes my per hour task or per hour emails and stuff like that. So definitely need to have a good understanding on the process, on what is the workflow looks like, your productivity assumptions, you know and occupancy again, right? I have interviewed a lot of folks in my tenure, and I have heard so many different things, and sometimes concepts behind occupancy. It could be an input, it could be an output. If you're using your service levels, then it would be an output, like, hey, if I want to maintain X service level, what my occupancy will be outcome. Or you want to make sure that, hey, I don't want to have a burnout, or I want to make sure that I have more efficiency. I need to drive my occupancy, and that defines your capacity models too. So have a good understanding of your occupancy model, your concurrency when you're doing multitasking, your shrink assumptions, and that's your productivity assumptions. And then headcount and staffing assumptions. Guys, understand your hiring lead times, right? A lot of people talk like, hey, I need to have very accurate forecast, and they keep changing it, right? But what good that change or accuracy is going to do if that is not going to provide enough lead times to make impact on your staffing, right? So understand those. How long does it take for you to get someone to be trained? What is the training length? What is the nesting period, on-job training period, time to competency? And I'll use this example in healthcare insurance, right? I work, for a healthcare company. Trust me, when you get in as an agent, a lot of agents, it will take 6 months before your handle time is normal, because there is just so much to learn, and it will take you so much longer to really get familiarized with a lot of it. It's a complex industry, it's a lot of knowledge. So having that knowledge, it really helps you, because a lot of time we do a common mistake of, hey, I got someone onboarded, I needed 50 people, I got 50, life is good. No, well, you got 50, they are new hires, they may be at 25% competent or 50%, meaning their handle time is double. or quadruple than a normal. So you need to understand that mix to put into the model. And then, how many hours, just the example I use, like, yes, what is the ratio between your full-time, part-time, FT versus headcount and stuff like that. So these are some of the things that you need to whiteboard and have it handy and ready and keep revisiting as you are building model, on capacity planning. Okay. What should be the outputs? Like we always think, hey, capacity planning model, I just need to come up with how many folks I need. Where would I put new hire classes and it's done? Well, it's not. Like, let's start thinking broader because once you build your model, I'm sure you always are busy working for someone to get some information. Why not get it in part of your model? Meaning, I build a model for my peak, and right before the peak, someone will come in and say from IT, like, hey, how many licenses you will need on a peak time? What is the Citrix usage? What is the concurrent usage? And we always just keep doing these exercises. Why don't we build it into a model? So expect what we should have. We get FTE requirements. How many heads do we need? What are the staffing commits going to look like? What are the hiring requirements, training resources requirements, which is classrooms? There are like number of things that can come out of this model, and people are relying on us to have accurate information so they can run their business smoothly, or their departments smoothly. Like I said, technical requirements, licenses, system resources, bandwidth, and of course, the biggest thing, right? What is the cost, right? The financial aspect of it. So these are kind of the outputs you should kind of think when you are building a capacity model. Now, this is where all you learn, all your learnings, all your data gathering comes into, you just pull up your socks and get your hands dirty and get to work and build things. And again, every business is unique. And even within every business, every season is different. As company gets mature, as business get matures, things change. So I have seen a lot of models in my tenure, which just like comes on a screen and everyone starts fainting. Not that the model's wrong, not that, the people who created the model does not know anything. They might be the smartest people in the room. They know their maths, they know their statistics, but it just comes out as, for lack of better term, just data vomiting. It's just like data all over the place, numbers and numbers. And you will, it's a turn off for operations. It's a turn off for people who are not workforce people. We can't expect that everyone will get, our nerdy language and workforce. So try to start and think simple, and it's very effective. You can have your models that has so much details, but how do you do the storytelling? That is always my theme when we talk about workforce management, is the storytelling and how crisp the model should look. A lot of time, like your CFO or your VP of care or your VP of workforce, all they may need to know is what is the demand, what is the supply, how much it's going to cost me, am I going to meet my goals or not? And if you can answer that within your model in one sheet, that is much cleaner. And then as the questions come in, you can just keep getting into detail. It's just peeling one after the other layer. But start there instead of starting in the deep, you know. So that's what I meant by start simple, think simple. Break down your models into modules, you know, have like tabs for executive or your clients or your operations or finance recruiting, and then have your WFM views. Keep the data sheets and your calculations and complex things into different tabs or different sheets. But when you do that, you need to be careful that you need to build integrity, where if the data is being pulled from one sheet to the other sheet or one model to the other, insert data validations just to make sure that, if I'm saying 50 people here, it shows 50 people on the other, right? And then you need to account for different things. And there's a long list of things that you need to be very aware of. It's not a cookie cutter that I create model for this business and it's going to work. The main framework will work, but build this. Cross-skilling, omni-channel routing, chat concurrency, what is your agent tenure? I just talk about like, hey, what is the impact on when we are ramping up? You need to maybe put in more people than what you need or head or FTEs because they're learning and they may not be as effective. But then as you ramp down, you have to also be careful that a lot of time when you ramp down, you are ramping down temporary staffing or low performing people or people who did or folks who think that, hey, this is not for me, and it may improve your AHT. So you need to really build for that. And then again, like look for the uniqueness um, of the business and and account for those things. What works in healthcare may not work the same for e-commerce. What works for e-commerce may not work for like a pharmacy business or may not work for like a telecom company and stuff like that. So when you build your models, think through these things. You know, let's go to the next one. Maintenance. This is so important that once you build the model, I've seen a lot of time, and I'm also a culprit of this. We all been through that. We'll create something, we'll build something fantastic, and then till someone else asks it, just like sitting somewhere, or we may not have gone back and done the maintenance that's required, right? Um, so again, it comes back to that life cycle, right? Analyze your assumptions versus actuals. Hey, you know what? I put in, 2/4% of attrition. Am I really getting that? Is it gonna change? What's happening in the business? What's happening around us? Pandemic situations. Look at your assumptions and keep going back. Hey, when we started this new queue or new segment of business, we were thinking, the AHT for calls would be, let's say, 10 minutes. But now we are matured and I constantly see that we are hitting or beating that goal and we are running 6-7 minutes. Should we change our AHT targets? Should we work with operations like, guys, dude, this is not a good AHT to use forward. We'll be overstaffed, vice versa, if it's going the wrong direction, other direction. So keep looking at your assumptions and keep brushing up on it. This is huge, maintaining a clean and accurate hit count tracking process. Including myself, I have seen we fail a lot of time because it's not just you, it's the systems where this hit count is being tracked. It's the processes. It's different. Like, you get new hires, you don't even know like where they're sitting. They might be with the trainer, they might be with the OJT group, nesting pods. They might be like, so you actually rely on other folks' information. And that's why the accuracy gets challenged. So having those regular discussions, having those cross checks, and having accurate head count is the must when you build or rebuild these models, because that will fail you in future if that's not right. Right? What are the throughput rates? If I need 20 people today, 20 FTEs today, how many should I hire? Because again, that becomes an assumption, right? I can talk to the recruiting and say, I need 20 bodies. Well, 20 bodies, 20 FTEs. Um, is that once they're done through OJT, like first day of class? What are the numbers you're talking about? So have those processes. And the last thing, but not the least, is compare, like get a good version control. Our forecasts always change. Marketing can come out and say, hey, we're gonna do A. Well, no, now we're gonna do B, right? Keep those versions in control, in check, as we always see changes. And the key, right? Communicate, communicate, and communicate. A lot of time, you know, people get numbers, they get married to it, and then there is a change, and then all of a sudden you are not on the same page. And once you're done, like communicating, communicating, and communicating, just re-communicate. There's nothing like over communication in workforce because the impact is large. At the end of the day, your customer or your agent or your company will suffer if that communication is broken. And don't wait to rebuild something. I know it's tedious, like we may have built like a complex model and then something change. And it might need to just like patchwork. It's okay to do some patching here and there, but there sometimes becomes enough patching where you need to like start on a clean slate. So that's what we do, as a workforce, folks, like, build, maintain, rebuild, maintain. Okay. So that's what we are here so far, kind of like looking into, um, how do we get there? How do we build the capacity model? I just saw someone put, can we return to the last point of the last slide? In the last point, meaning we are talking about business or LOB uniqueness. If that's correct, I'm going to look at the chat window. I'm going to kind of quickly talk through that, what I meant by that. For example, I have a business or LOB where all I'm doing is taking one type of calls, right? That's what I'm trained for. That's what I do day in, day out. And that's pretty simple, basic, straightforward model. Now you look at some other business, like I was just mentioning, and some of this is reputation, is I'm not doing the same thing whole day, right? I cannot have one skill or two skills and simultaneously the calls are coming in. I may be doing different tasks. That time of the day, I might be doing inbound and then outbound and then chat and then email, then processing. You need to really consider those in your models. And how do you consider those things? So generally, when we build our models, we have forecast groups or work types. Hey, calls, emails, chats. And then we calculate requirements, how many people I need to do in chat and how many in email. But that works when you are dedicated. But then if I have complex multi-skilling profiles, that agent type or agent profile A can take A and B work, but then agent type B can do B and C type of work. And agent type C can do A, B, and C, all three. How do you design for that complexity is what I meant by that. Is yes, if you look at on their own skills, they might be looking overstaffed or understaffed. When you look at as an overall picture, they might look fine, but you still struggle in one or other work type. And that's where you design. How do you train for uptraining, upskilling? How do you show and tell that story that, yes, I am fine to handle all of this workload? I may need, let's say, 100 FTEs. But if I look at the uniqueness within those work types, there is a work type or work stream that is understaffed because we don't have enough trained people just for that work type. And how do you design those things in your modeling? And I think that's what I was talking to Dr. Shiva. Let's have another deep dive session sometime in future where we really like pull out like bolts and nuts of capacity planning. Like how do you design for those things instead of just me talking through just the philosophy behind that? Like what I have been doing so far is just talking, right? Just philosophy behind that. It's not like the real handwork that goes into that. So we can definitely, brush up more on that, for some another session. So hope that answer your question. Um, okay, back to the track. So yes, please don't wait and let's rebuild, right? This is the core discussion, why we are here. There are like a lot of questions around, hey, we are in pandemic situation. It is really tough to do capacity planning, workforce management, and give out your commitments to your clients or to your vendor partners because you don't know what is going to happen. It's the dilemma in the pandemic, right? Like I put some things here like, hey, what do you think of employee safety or customer satisfaction? Like in the beginning of the discussion, we talked about it. Is this data a new normal or it's anomaly? It's hard to tell that. Is it a headwind? Is it like a blocker? Is it going to slow you down? Or this is something you can really utilize as an opportunity, right? And my favorite tagline, right? I always say forecasting or fortune telling. It just feels like I might as well just roll a dice or flip a coin because does not matter how much data I use, I am just wrong. I'm not accurate. And at the end of the day, we are the one who need to speak behind those numbers and why those forecasts are off. And then it's too late, right? How do you do capacity planning when we are in the pandemic situations, right? That's like the biggest discussion that we wanted to handle today. So how do you address these uncertainties? What are the things we can do? What is in our control? Okay. Very first thing, again, have your basics right. You know, all those things that we talked about so far has to be top notch. You need to have accurate modeling. You need to have accurate data and processes. That's like your foundation. And I cannot emphasize enough on those foundations, right? We all, go back, and whenever something is broken, 9 out of 10 times you're missing something in your model. You may not have covered your basic. There is a process that's broken. Otherwise, workforce folks, know it all. Like we really, really know our business. It's just doing the boring things every day. Like um, that's what I learned, in my past job is like as you get mature, there are things you feel it's so easy, it's boring. I need to do the same thing every day. Workforce management is like playing golf. You come in, it's the same 18 holes, you do the same strokes, and one day you have a good game, you enjoy, you celebrate, you go home. Next day, back to the same game. Do it all over again and forget that you had a win yesterday or a loss yesterday. How do I make an impact tomorrow, right? It's the same, maybe boring, but that's why we are here, because we like that boring stuff. To do it every day the same, and yet try to do something that makes a difference or think outside of the box. So how do you really address these uncertainties? Analyze your data gaps versus abnormalities. Is it a new normal? So I'll give you an example. Let's say a company is growing. Every year they're growing. Get some water. Every year, let's say your growth path is 10%, 15%, 30%. And when you do your long-term forecasting, you apply those growths that, hey, last year I had X amount of shipments or um, orders, what have you, subscribers, whatever the line you're working for. And I'm expecting the growth. So you apply that growth pattern. Then you apply your contact rate. Hey, how many contacts I normally get per shipment or per order, per subscriber? And you build that model and come up with your forecast. Then you do your headwinds and tailwind analysis that, hey, because of A, B, and C, I'm going to get more contacts per shipment or per subscribers or whatnot. But I'm going to do improvements and it's going to reduce some of the contacts. So what that will look like. And then you come up with your forecast. Now you are applying that growth, but now you're going to be applying growth to the pandemic data. And you have to be careful. If all of a sudden your business went really up, let's say you were in retail, you're in e-commerce, you may see different things. Maybe retail went down, e-commerce went up, people were operating from home. Or if you are in a hospitality industry, where you may have the business trending down, but then your contacts may have shot up because people have to book and rebook and cancel in travel industry, right? That data, what will be the most predictable behavior? And again, right, we don't have the crystal ball here. And that's why we need to invest and learn from the data that is it gonna stay or behave the same way? And that's where your workforce guts comes in play. Again, there is no right or wrong answer sometimes, and that's where we need to land. So a lot of our workforce folks, with the data, you can get to like 70, 80% accuracy, most of the business easily. That 20% gray area is where it makes you best in class. And our job is to reduce that error gap down to minimum. And that's where you need to really look at the data and say, hey, what is it going to do? Most likely one thing. And second thing, what is if you are wrong? Because you may be, we don't know. Like I said, we don't have crystal ball. Side of the error you want to land on. And what I mean by that, if my customer is most important to me, I'm in that stage of the business, then should I land on overstaffing side? I should rely on that side. It's a pendulum swing. Or if efficiency is important, if bottom line is important, I need to control cost. I need to take some risk, and you land on the other side of the equation. So more forecast accuracy, like I keep saying, is important, but what is your goal as a company, as an organization? Which side of the error you want to stay? It's the key. Okay. If a client is something that is, we all are in business and there are stack rank. If our client or a vendor is on top of the stack rank, meaning that's generating the most revenue or that's the most important relationship, do I go extra mile on that side of the equation or I need to save money there? And then communicate those things back and say, okay, this is the risk we're going to take. So have very clear expectations, right? So analyze your data and understand abnormalities and try to focus on which side of the equation or error you want to land on. Scenario-based modeling and staffing commits. This is really important. It's like, hey, a peak is coming. I need to give my commits to my client, or I need to ask for commits from my vendor partners. Have a scenario base. So if you are a BPO partner, you need to have scenarios built in. Hey, I can deliver A, B, and C, but these are the risks behind that. If I have a site closure in Philippines, if the pandemic happens and I lose connectivity on a site and I have to rely on work at home staffing, how much impact or variation that can bring? Is it 10% less, 15% less? And when that happens, what are the different levers you can pull? Those things we generally plan on a very linear basis, like, because the business, it's very stable, our seasons in and out, and you have some plans behind it, but generally you don't have to go to the extremes. But now with the pandemic situations, you get into the extreme scenarios. All of a sudden, what happens if 3 of your site closes or lockdowns happens? You need to have those scenarios ready. And how do you then use flexible scheduling, flexible modeling? If you want to bring people, and that's what I'm talking about, like, hey, is it a problem or is it an opportunity? It could be an opportunity because I had a spiky volume and I need to staff for the humps of the day. Like, hey, if I have a first peak in the day or spike around like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the second comes around 2 o'clock, and in between I'm sitting, kind of a little idle. I think I need a split shift. And it's tough to get a split shift when you're on site. It might be easy to get it when people are work from home because they have longer lunches and stuff and they're more acceptable. So it could become your opportunity, which was a problem on a normal day situation. So how do you model and come up with the solutions that works for those environments where we really have a lot of uncertainty? Okay. Generally, as a capacity planner, you were like mostly looking at long term, like something, a blip happens in today or yesterday, it's not going to bother you because it was an odd day and it happened. Nowadays, with pandemic situation, we might need to focus a little more than what we normally do in your short-term trends because that could become a longer trend. So investigate on any small things that are happening. And again, keep going back to that, a very strong partnership and a clear communication. So for example, if I'm a client and I'm getting commitments from my vendor partners and saying, hey, my confidence level on my forecast is not as how it always been. I'm telling you, I need 500 FTEs. Those 500 can turn into 550 or 450, depending on which way the business goes, because I don't know the forecast. So have plans and contingency plans. What if I need more? Or what if I need less? Or know the capacity from each and every one of your partner, that what is your upper limit and what is your lower limit. Traditional capacity planning that you and I did is, hey, I'm a client, I need A, B, and C partners. You commit to 50, you commit to 100, you commit to 2000, and life is good, right? You committed, and then we may have small variations. That is not the case anymore. We may need to know that if my partner A struggles, what is my capacity to partner B? How can I shift those requirements and have those models ready and those scenarios ready? And once you build those relationships and have candid conversations and transparency, you can drive better results instead of just going last minute and like, okay, well, I got hit by this now. What do we do, right? Same on the flip side. As a vendor partner, you know, display your models in flexibility. Hey, I could hit by A scenario or B scenario. And what do we do? Like I mentioned earlier, build those relationships where you can have very open discussions. At the end of the day, if you are not being able to do tomorrow, you rather tell your client ahead of time so they can go and get capacity from somewhere else. Again, this is a constant theme whenever I talk to workforce with anybody. It's okay to get beaten up today, then really fail when it happens. I rather get beaten up when I'm planning than get beaten up after the execution, because then there is no turn back. And that's pretty important. So again, some of the philosophical discussion here, some of kind of the tricks that we should use, but it takes a lot of modeling and detail work that maybe for a detailed session where we can really look and build scenarios or take uniqueness and answer those questions and build them. So I think time wise, we have some time left for Q&A, and I'm completely fine. Like it's, gosh, what, 5 a.m. for me here. So it's early. I know some of you guys may need to go home. You're just done with your shifts, and but I can stay a little longer if there are more questions. But I'm open for Q&A, and I'll say something here. So I put like question and Altoid. That's a new theme at Alto. So folks who like in Amazon, people say Amazonians. So in Alto, it's Altoids. People who work, and that's why we say questions and Altoid. So I'm an Altoid now. So questions and Altoid. So yeah, let's open up here. Dr. Sheila, if you can help me moderate, if there are any questions that come to you, came to you directly or in the chat window, I'm going to open that forum now.
Yeah, I'm just referring to the chat window. There's a question from Dubin. Do you factor in load handled by bots into your workload assumption?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Do you factor in load handled by bots into your workload assumptions?
And let me see if I'm understanding the question here. Is it by bots, like chat bots and stuff like that you're talking about here?
I guess so.
Yeah. So
however, if
yes,
person is there and I could unmute the person.
Yeah, please.
Yep. Whoever would want to have a two-way conversation, please raise your hands so that we will have you as co-host to come in and have a conversation, friends. Now I'm just trying to get Doveen. Yeah, Doveen is saying that RPA bots.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So yes and no. And I'll use a classic example: fraud and risk business, right? So I'll explain you what we mean by that. So in e-commerce business, mainly, and most of the business, there is this fraud transaction that could impact your revenue. Meaning someone used my credit card and placed an order, right? Or I placed an order and I just go and decline the charge or whatnot. So whenever an organization looks at the transactions, they try to identify that what percent of these transactions or orders could be fraud, right? And then you look at the impact of that. If it's like less than certain dollars, it takes more money to even, like if it's a $2 order or $5 order, my cost to handle that contact may be more than the transaction itself. Then they let it slide and say, okay, that becomes a risk. It's okay, we can take that much risk. And that's where the automation comes in play, where below certain level of fraud amounts or whatnot, you can put a bot to just look through few things and handle it versus doing the manual work. And you can trigger that by looking at your risk, how much risk you are taking. Okay, and looking at your workforce, that how many people do you have to maintain that, right? In those scenarios, yes, it becomes very relevant to understand how much volume should be handled or could be handled by automation or autobot, right? Because it's a flex that it can turn up and down. But if you have an automated system, for example, self-serve options that comes in play, your historical data already captures those activities on a regular level, because the work that comes in, it's already after the automation or chatbots or self-serves were done, and you're taking the pure data. In that scenario, you don't account for that on a streamline. However, that's a really good question. You need to keep eye on that. If you remember, like in previous discussion, I say when you are planning and when you're planning those forecasting those models, you need to understand the headwinds and the tailwinds, meaning what are the things that are going to drive more volume and what are the things that are going to reduce the volume, because now we are introducing more automation. And that's why you need to be in a regular cadence with your automation self-serve group or process improvement group to understand how much contact reduction we are going to forecast and how much actually we are getting out of that. And you need to account for that into your model. So yes and no. But that's more when you're doing your forecasting and your long-term forecast. Once you get your numbers in, then you don't need to worry about it because it's filtered through and you are now talking only about the work that's going to be done manually. I hope that answers your question.
I Devin, do you work with that? You have any other questions? Okay, she said thank you. All right. So now we have Priya. Priya has asked a question. Is occupancy input in workload calculation and output in SL based calculation?
Very good question again. So thanks for asking that. Is really important. We just talked about that. When you are designing a capacity planning model and you are trying to define different service levels, like, hey, my work type A could have 80-20 service level, 80% of the contacts in 20 seconds. Or I want to increase that to 90% in 30 seconds, right? You really need to understand the impact of occupancy. You know, when you want to provide a better, faster service, your occupancy goes down. When you want to provide slightly looser service, you can keep the agents busy. So it's an input and an output. If you have a very defined call arrival patterns, and especially for it is more important. It's important in smaller businesses because it's very volatile. In large volume business, even if you are increasing your service level goals, your occupancy may not have to be suffered as much because it's much smoother curve rather than just a spiky volume. And that's why you need to have your earning models to help you define where you will land in that occupancy. And if you think that's going to be too much burnout or it's going to spend a lot of money, you need to rethink your service level goal. So yes, it's kind of like that cycle. First, you need to use your earnings, and especially for smaller business, to define or get an output of occupancy. What occupancy will I get if I put X amount of FTEs? And you massage that back into your model. If I want to change that occupancy and yet still drive the same service level results, what would I do, right? So it's an input and an output. But normally, when you are working with a 24/7 business or a large volume business, you can pretty much assume what you're gonna run into, and that comes with experience and looking at data. And when you do, you apply a very flat occupancy, and you change or fine tune that occupancy setting depending on what service you're trying to get. Okay, so you could have just your volume AHT, your workload, and then you apply your aux attendance and occupancy, and you get your FT requirements. And that occupancy calculation for mostly large businesses, you would exactly know, hey, if I want to run 80-60, I can go 80-85%, or even sometimes close to 90% when I get on peak. and it should not impact my service levels. And you will see that, like when you look at past data, that hey, I had like 10% over forecasted volume. I ran 85%, 89%, 90% occupancy. I still was able to maintain my service level because it's a large volume. So those things, again, it's good to have earning and a lot of people, but you don't want to mix up that into your main capacity planning models. Otherwise, it just becomes out of your hands to handle and maintain. But you need to have those studies done on models done on on earning and figure out what occupancies you want to use in your model. I generally recommend to have a tunable occupancy into your model depending on your service level and the size of the volume.
Thanks, Nirav.
No
Next
worries.
question is, how do you calculate planning accuracy? Like how we calculate the scheduling efficiency?
So I heard two things, right? One is planning efficiency or scheduling. At the end of the day, it's not a direct measurement, but your occupancy utilization, okay, and your cost per contact and your service level, ASA, wait times, both are the indications or the indicators of how well the planning or the schedules were. Okay. Now, schedule inefficiency. How do you calculate that? Right. A lot of time, like our workforce softwares have certain things built into that has some general assumptions. But you want to get a ratio, your targeted occupancy versus your actual occupancy. Okay. And that becomes your schedule influx. Meaning, if my target is 90%, but I'm running 80% occupancy, okay? And if that's not driven by, because see, there are a lot of factors that play here, guys. So you cannot just have a cookie cutter answer. You need to make sure that your forecast was accurate, because the very first thing that you look at when you run really high or low occupancy is what was the forecast? Was it over or under? If that was due to under forecast, it's not just schedule inefficiency, but the forecast was right, your arrival patterns were right, and you still ran under your occupancy, that means your schedules are not efficient. So the ratio between that becomes your inefficiency. And sometimes what happens is it's a small business and you're trying to cover the hours of operations. So even if you need 4 people to handle the volume, you need to have 14 because you're trying to cover. So you need to build that inefficiency because your schedules will be inefficient. You want your schedules to be inefficient. Otherwise, meaning you run low occupancy, otherwise you won't get the coverage throughout the day, right? So it's a different ways you can measure depending on what kind of business you are managing. Is it small size, large size, and how your schedules are being generated. Now, when you talk about the model efficiency, again, it comes to those two things, how accurate or how efficient or your productive your staff is versus your SLA goals. So what is your deviation? Meaning if you're spending more money and not getting service levels, definitely there is a problem in your model, right? But there are a few things you want to measure, and that whole set of measurements tells how good or bad your planning is. And you can come up with scorecards, and a lot of companies do it differently. There is no like one way of doing it. There is a weightage we put. So volume forecast accuracy, AHT forecast accuracy, your service level versus your goal, your occupancy, and your cost per contact versus your forecasted cost per contact. What is your accuracy on these things, right? And then your intraday arrival, so your interval level forecast accuracy, how many intervals you're missing and how many intervals you're meeting your forecast or staffing. Set of those measures, you can give it a weighted that, hey, for this business, I would give 20% weightage to forecast accuracy, 30% weightage to schedule efficiency, and that you can create a combined metric that can really define how well you're planning, if that's what you're after. I see one more question here saying, should we add AHT target to the incentive schema of agents, or this will after their quality? Uh, it's on the Zoom. AHT targets is something that you need to put. So you are accountable for that, but you are not responsible for that. So I'll explain that what it means by that. Your L&D team and your operation should be helping you with the AHT targets. What that AHT should look like for a tenured agent. They may give you like a group breakdown that, hey, if you're 0 to 30 tenured or 30 days, this is your AHT. They can give you buckets, but they are the one who should be defining those AHT targets. You take that and you do a combination and come up with the overall AHT goal. Okay. But at the same time, you can always, whenever you feel that, hey, you're going to run short on staff or you're going to get more volume, you need to work with the operation, say, hey, how can we squeeze this AHT down? How can we incentivize agents to do this so I can get more, especially in pandemic situation, right? More out of less workforce that we have on hand. So I hope that answers your question on the chat. Okay, Dr. Shiva, what next?
Yeah, we have the next question from Shashi. Please share some views on predicting deferred channel service levels.
Could you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Did you answer this question?
No, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I had just a quick audio lag in between.
Yeah, so Shashi is asking this question. Please share some views on predicting deferred channel service levels.
Deferred channel service levels. Again, a really, really good question. There is like a whole different science when it comes to back office. And trust me, there's a lot of work that we need to do when we do deferred channels back office, right? There are different concepts, and again, what is important to the organization. So for example, an email came in and we have a setup where we automatically reply, hey, thanks for your email, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer. We'll reply to you within 24 hours or whatnot. Or these are certain information before we reply you. These are some resources you can look into. And that may answer your question and stuff like that. That is not service level. It could be mistaken as, hey, the email came in at 10 o'clock in the morning and my bot answered it, right in half a second, okay? It is the first relevant answer. That is how you measure service level. That's one way of doing it. But depending on what is important, there are two things you can use. Either the back and forth communication, and I'm just talking in terms of email right now, we'll get back to other items. In email terms, A is either every response back and forth, which is like your ping pong with the customer, is a contact, and you measure your service level within that wait time. I got a question, I replied to the customer either asking for more information or providing a solution, and that is one service level. Now customer came back, tag on the same email or same ticket, and that becomes a second contact, right? And then this clock starts again, and what is my response time on that, right? So that's how you define your service level, right? And then at a point in that transaction back and forth that you need to escalate, because now it's out of my tier one hand, it becomes tier two, and that becomes a different goal, and you can measure it that way. Again, tools are tough measuring these things, and I completely get it. So you need to have a defined process, work with your automation team, work with your reporting, BI data warehousing team to get it accurate. There are challenges I could not even solve in a lot of different verticals where you have a system where we don't know. There are like threaded transactions, and it's so tough to calculate that. Then the other ways, it does not matter how many back and forth communication are happening. All I want to know when I open a ticket or open an email or a case, and when I resolve it. And that's how you measure your service level. It could be longer, but that's what you look into in terms of that communication. Or there are trigger points in between that threaded communication where, okay, now I finished. So for example, if a request or process or a ticket or deferred work came in, and this is classical too, pharmacy thing or any pharmacy or threaded things or process oriented work stream where the work come in, and then I do process A, process B, process C, and process D. And then it gets back to resolved state or unresolved state. Each process has different service level targets. Meaning if I'm just intaking someone's request, say, hey, I need to schedule an oil change. That's one process, right? And I say, okay, here's your calendar. That's one process. It may have a very small service level window. Then really working with the customers, finding out requirements and define what needs to be done. And then you quote the item, you price it, you get an agreement with the customer that you agree to the price, get the billing, and then deliver the product. There are different phases that you go through in that life cycle, and each of those steps could have a different service level goal. But you need to have a system to tag, identify, and categorize these different stages of that same ticket to really understand, is it just a back and forth? Or if someone says, hey, thank you for resolving, well, that's not another inquiry, that's done, right? You resolved it. So it is tough, it is challenging, and that's why I said there is a lot of work that needs to be done behind those. A lot of CRMs have done some great work around it. But again, that's an area of opportunity, and that's a new world where people don't like to talk over the phone. People don't have time. And we are working more and more into those back office environments, and we need to solve for those. But that's some of the tips on how do you calculate those service levels in the different channel environment.
Thanks, Nirav. We have Santana Krishnan has asked a lengthy question. Better I allow him to talk.
Sure.
Santana, you are free to talk now. Yeah, you may ask questions to Nirav. Better you could articulate it. Yeah.
Hey guys, morning.
Hey, morning.
Nirav, a quick question here. Which is the best way to calculate the handled call volume count? So are we supposed to take the true to interval or the time at which the calls that we receive? Because the airline C or any scientific model is arrived or devised based upon the call arrival time, not the true to interval. So which one do you think the best way to adopt?
Another one of my favorite questions. So thanks for asking that. And I know, in like 10, 12 years ago when I started workforce, everything is linear, right? You just like have one handle contact. You come in and it counts that way. Now we have so many different variations where we can really dig in and understand what happened from the time it got into the IVR. Do I count that time? Or it got to the queue? Do I count that time? Or it got to the agent? Or when agent is done answering that contact? What do we count? So when you are doing your capacity planning, you want to account for that contact in a start of the interval when the call came into the queue. Why? Because it went to the next interval or interval after, either because your handle time, because I started the contact and I just keep talking and it was complex issue, and it may have taken me like 20, 25, 30, 35 minutes, and it got into next interval and the call was done there. Now, if I count that call in the next interval, I will have longer wait times because what was the customer behavior? Customer called us in a previous interval. I'm done answering on the next interval, right? Where do you want to have the staff? Have the staff when customer called or contacted us. So when you do your capacity planning, it should be the start of the interval. However, though, and that's why I'm conflicting myself, depending on what are you doing, and it could create complexity. And a lot of time you just need to really work with the rest of the users, operations, and your real-time people and your staffing schedulers and your forecaster, and come up with what is the best way to go about it. But when it comes to capacity planning or scheduling, I would want to count as start now. But when you're looking at the real time, when you're trying to define how did we service our customer, you want to look at when the call was answered or done answered. Because, for example, let's say if I close my queue at, let's say, midnight, right? And then I am still clearing my queue, answering contacts, even if the contacts came in at 11. Or I'm like have a trail end because the EHTs are longer. And if you just use the start of the contact, it will look like the calls all came in at 11 and they were done there. And even if people worked post though that close up the queue, it won't show anything happened after that. So you lose that visibility. So again, right, depending on the perspective, you want to use either start or the end time. But for capacity planning, when you want to really staff, you want to staff to when the call came in or the contact came in. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Nirav, that helps. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, and that's a classic workforce management theme, right? We always, and that's why sometimes people really get irritated with us. Like, why do you always have two versions of the story? Why do you always talk like you're a split personality? You will say, hey, let's do that, but now let's do this, because it's always a scenario-based logic. We always need to think through what ifs. There are a lot of what ifs in workforce, and there may not be a black and white cookie cutter answer, and that's where the experience comes in play. Okay. Um,
Thanks, Nirav. Nirav, I have last question. I see that Narayan Somi has responded to some of the questions. Narayan, are you there? I'll just unmute him properly. Narayan Swami could talk about it.
Hi, Shiva. Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, Narayan.
So Nirav, for example, on planning accuracy standpoint, we used to calculate like staffing requirement was actual and AH requirement, AH plan was actual, and likewise shrinkage actual was planned. So these are the metrics, something contributing for the staffing planning. Okay, capacity planning. So to calculate the accuracy, we can't say exactly right. Only we used to say like capacity planning, from capacity planning standpoint, only the staffing was actual headcount that can use to measure the staffing accuracy, right? So instead of that, so we are gently to standardize something. Uh, so these are standard metrics, something for a call center process, AHG, occupancy, shrinkage, volume. So these are the metrics contributing for the staffing capacity planning, right? So these are the metrics. These are the metrics accuracy. Can we create can we give a weightage for on each metrics, and then we can arrive the final accuracy? Will that
no,
give the right?
yes, absolutely. And that's, I think, what I was talking about. So thanks for that clarifying question. Yes. Now, again, the reason that we should not do a cookie cutter calculation and come up with a, hey, this is the capacity planning accuracy. And there are reasons behind that. Because the goals that you set for accuracy could be different depending on the business and what is important to the company. For example, for me, let's say I am in a business where my skill A is customer retention and skill B is collections. I'll just use that example. Collections is, folks who either are late on payments or, they neglected their payments, and I really need to get the money back to retain my revenue and get them the service they signed up for. And retention is someone who is unhappy with the company or got a better deal and they want to leave, right? In a business model, both customers are important, but where would you spend more of your money? Because if you have a set of some customer base, they are struggling always to pay, and I'll say this respectfully and carefully, and it's always going to be like, more maintenance for us, and it's not a good business decision to spend more money there, or I would spend more money to retain my business, right? It could be one or the other answer. And that's how you want to see, hey, my occupancy or service level, it's okay if I suffer on one queue versus the other queue. And that's why your weightage changes now, right? And that's why it could not be a cookie cutter in my mind metric. You can really define what is important. You stack rank those things. Hey, I have 6 metrics. What is more important than the other one? Is it okay to miss service levels for this queue if I only have a certain budget and I'm just going to staff to what I have? And occupancy is most important to me, right? Or I don't care about people just sit available, but I want to answer that call as soon as it come in or that contact. Then service level becomes important. Occupancy is not important. So you really look at what is the strategy, what is important, and then you need to create a personalized weightage. And that has to be kind of not just the workforce metric, it's the whole strategy of your customer care organization. What is important and what takes precedence? Because remember, workforce is a three-legged stool we always talk about, right? One is your customer, one is your agent, and one is your bottom line, right? And you need to really balance that, otherwise it's just gonna collapse, right? If you give too much of customer satisfaction, your cost is gonna go high or your agents will burn out, right? Vice versa. If you pull one lever too much, the other two will suffer. And that's why it cannot be like a standardized metric in my mind, if that answers your question.
Yeah, got it. Thanks for your answer. And this is not asking for the standardized for all the business. It depends on the business type of business. Like you said, collections will have important of in terms of revenue, and for the customer kind of call center basis business, they have a customer satisfaction score or service over goal something. And for the retail business, something like handle numbers, handle capacity something. So based on the metrics, based on the business type, we can something we can standardize, right? That's what it's not
Absolutely,
about
absolutely
for
you can.
all the
Yeah,
metrics. Yeah,
absolutely you can standardize, and you can come up with a concept like, hey, do I just say, hey, error rate, right? So if,
yeah,
or variance to go, right? And then you apply weightage and you combine that. And what is your expected score versus what you delivered? And then are you over
yeah,
delivering or under? And that's how you can define the metric. Yes,
yeah. Thank you so much. That's
no worries. I see one question here too. Which tool do you prefer for capacity planning, like Erlang, etc., and why? Uh, Really quick, I think Mohammed asked it. Again, depending on what you have, right? If you try to do Erlang for a business that has like millions of contacts, it may not give you any more accuracy than if you try to just plot a workload model. Okay, it works, right? But if you have a smaller business, definitely you need to go back into your Erlang calculations because there are interval level, you know, um, things that you need to adhere to, your scheduling and efficiencies and stuff, and then you build it that way. So either you go top down or bottom up, or sorry, you know, it really depends on, like I said, size of the business. I like them both. I have worked on larger businesses mostly, and have done mostly planning into Excel spreadsheet using, the targets that we have set and come up with FT calculations that way. But then there are times where you're dealing with a smaller, side of the business, and you need to get back into earnings and stuff like that. So I hope that answered that question. Um, Anything else, guys?
Yeah, Nirav, Jyoti is asking any idea Anna plan is used for capacity planning.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Uh, and
Again, Shiva, I don't know, somehow whenever you ask me question, there is an audio like, what was that?
Jyoti is asking question, any idea on Anna plan used for capacity planning? Anna
I'm
plan.
so sorry. I have, I'll admit to my ignorance. I don't know about that or that tool, if you're talking about. I have always done, not that that's the right way to do it, but I have always done my capacity planning in Excel. Um, you know, uh, again, right, that's another discussion too. Like, what do we do is capacity planning for contact centers or call centers, but this skill is very expandable into IT capacity planning or retail, or you can really go places with that. So I'm sorry, I haven't or never used that tool.
That's about it, Nirav. Thank you so much for taking your time out. I know that we have stretched the time beyond the timeline. Uh, we really loved getting the questions from the audience. We had very good houseful and very informative questions, and also like answers. And your session has been very insightful and giving a lot of takeaways for many of the WFM folks. And
No, I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for, first of all, having me over. I know we went over time. I know folks hang on, and thanks for asking all those questions. Again, guys, it's something we all learn from each other. Just remember that no one has mastered this, right? That's why we all have jobs. Otherwise, someone would have mastered it and created a software, and boom, that's your capacity planning. It needs a lot of hand holding. There are always nuances to it. We always learn new things about it. I learned things and I'm like, oh my goodness, all these years I was just doing this, not wrong, but I could have used a different angle on that one. So the day you feel that you have mastered it, that's the most dangerous day for anybody of us. So, we all learn from each other. So please keep sharing best practices. Always, start and listen to or have time to listen to like how someone else is doing this, and that's how you build your knowledge base. So I really appreciate it. I enjoy it, and I want you guys good luck to the new year. Stay safe. Pandemic is still very much out there. And use your best practices. I wish you all good luck, and hope to either work with you in future or talk to you soon, guys. And always, it's a pleasure and it's an honor to be on the GWFM platform, guys. It's amazing what I want to take a minute and say thanks to Dr. Shiva and the team for creating such a nice platform where it's based on just sharing your knowledge, and we all are humble uh, to teach and learn and show and tell, and it excites me, and it really brings out the best of people. So thank you for creating that environment, GWFM.
thanks, Nirav. GWFM exists because of leaders and professionals like you and also the audience. We always believe that GWFM means that all the WFM folks across the world. I mean, it's really a great pleasure that we always have getting people together every time. It could be a masterclass, it could be a session or an online event, or anything that we do. We always love getting people around the world in one platform, and make everyone to listen to, or ideate and ask questions and create knowledge sharing, and also professional networking. So
Awesome.
great to have you with us today. Yeah, truly, GWFM expresses deepest gratitude for your valuable presence and time early morning, that it took time off to share your valuable knowledge with the rest of the WFM folks around the world. Thank you so much. And audience, thank you so much for taking your time out to join. Hope you have enjoyed the session and really got great questions from most of you. And we would make this recording available on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also stay connected on our GWFM social media. You take a good care, stay safe, and looking forward to connecting with each one of you very soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. And one last thing, again, right? I think in the first slide, I have my phone number. You guys have my LinkedIn. Please feel free. Please reach out if you're trying to solve something. Maybe I will end up learning something by helping. I will try to participate as much as I can, and that's how we all learn, by helping each other. There is no formal WFM degree. I mean, Dr. Shiva, different story for you, but you did a lot of research. But I hope some days, like in education system, like put this in, because we are in that customer centric environment. In a lot of businesses, customer is the king, and what good place it is there to handle your customer other than workforce management. So yeah, please reach out, guys. Feel free to do that. Thank you so much.